I was the general manager of my college radio station, which was an impressive sounding title that carried with it almost no actual responsibilities. But there were a few, and one of them was to arrange transportation for the musical acts who would periodically come through town to perform at shows that we were promoting on campus. In the winter of 1976, we put on a show with Peter Tosh. Anybody remember Peter Tosh? Reggae fans. Peter Tosh was one of the original Wailers in Bob Marley and the Wailers, and he had just started a solo career, and he was touring college campuses in New England. Touring college, that's up and down New England. To promote his first solo record, which was called Legalize It. Some of you remember that. The it of the title, referring apparently to marijuana. I was not expecting that. Tosh was scheduled to fly into Logan Airport the night before the show, arriving at about 11:30. And about 11 o'clock, I got a call from the guy who was supposed to pick him up. He sounded terrible. He was down with the flu. Couldn't make the pickup. It was too late to get anybody else. I told him not to worry about it. I would do it myself. So I borrowed a car from a friend of mine down the hall and took off for Logan Airport. I got there about 10 minutes late, which was pretty good time under the circumstances, and I pulled up to the curb outside baggage claim. And there was Peter Tosh, tall, 6'5", handsome, long dreads. Standing next to him was a guy who was easily as tall as Tosh, but twice as wide. He was the most massive individual I had ever seen. This was Dexter, Tosh's road manager, who I had been told would be traveling with him. Dexter opened the trunk of the car, threw in their suitcases, opened the back seat of the car. Peter Tosh slid in without a word. Dexter got in after him, his briefcase on his lap. I pulled away from the curb, and before I could launch into the lovely welcome to Boston remarks that I had drafted in my head in the car on the way to the airport, Dexter lays into me. He's furious. Don't I know who this man is? How dare I show this man the disrespect to be late to pick him up at the airport? How dare I disrespect a man of the stature of Peter Tosh? And I thought, well, this is educational. I've already learned something here tonight. And what I had learned was that among people who ritually smoke the most potent dope in the world 16 hours a day, apparently punctuality is a thing. Who knew, right? But I apologized, and this seemed to cool Dexter out temporarily, and he turned his attention to Tosh, who still has not said a word. And Dexter starts a monologue talking to Tosh in this Jamaican patois that I just do not have the capacity to understand, but I pick out words here and there. There was a lot of I-re, there was a lot of I and I. I knew enough about reggae, I knew just enough about reggae to know that I and I could refer to me, or to the Holy Spirit, or to me and the Holy Spirit who lives within me, or to you and the Holy Spirit, you and me, or you and me and the Holy Spirit. And I remember thinking that between the ganja and the pronoun trouble, it was a miracle anything ever got done in Jamaica at all. Thank you. As if on cue, Dexter reaches into his briefcase and he pulls out the biggest spliff I've ever seen. It was as big around as my forearm. He fires it up in the back of the car, passes it to Tosh. The two of them start getting high in the back of the car. The car fills up with smoke, thick, choking pot smoke, burning my eyes, into my lungs. It's blocking the windshield. I'm getting high and operating a motor vehicle. I know, however, that smoking weed is a sacrament of their faith. I don't want to be disrespectful. So I start surreptitiously trying to crank down the driver's side window, just a crack, just enough to vent some of the smoke out. Dexter doesn't miss a thing. Dexter sees this. What are you doing? It's winter, it's New England, it's the middle of the night, that air is freezing, roll up the window. So I rolled up the window again. The car immediately fills up with smoke. So there I am, 19 years old, middle of the night, in a borrowed car, hotboxing with Peter Tosh. Hotboxing with Peter. It's also the title of my autobiography. Tosh still has not said a word until, finally, he does. From the back seat, I hear Peter Tosh say, "Dunkin' Donuts." I say, "What?" Tosh is pointing out through the windshield at a Dunkin' Donuts. He says again, "Dunkin' Donuts." Dexter says, "Pull over." I pull the car over to the curb. Tosh is up and gone in a flash. I say to Dexter, "What just happened here?" And Dexter explains that on a tour of New England with Bob Marley and the Wailers some years before, somebody had taken Tosh to a Dunkin' Donuts, and he loved it, he flipped for it, he's been talking about it ever since. By the time we got into the Dunkin' Donuts, Tosh was standing in front of a rack of freshly baked donuts, about 24 different varieties, transfixed, paralyzed. It's just Tosh and the waitress. There's nobody else in the place. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I step up on one side, Dexter on the other. And Tosh speaks to me directly for the first time. He says to me, "Which is the best one?" Here at last, I feel we've arrived at a place in the conversation where I have a contribution to make. Something I know something about, right? So I say, "Well, they're all good, but some of them are better than others." Tosh says, "What's the best one?" I say, "The best one is the chocolate cream-filled donut." Right? Tosh motions for the waitress. The waitress comes over. Tosh says, "Chocolate cream-filled donuts." Waitress says, "How many?" Tosh says, "All of them." Waitress pulls out a couple of boxes and a shopping bag. Tosh says, "No, for here." We take the last 3 seats at the far end of the counter. Me, Peter Tosh, Dexter. I politely take one chocolate cream-filled donut in my hand and start to eat. They take one in each hand and they start stuffing them in their faces. Powdered sugar flying everywhere. And Tosh is transformed. He's brilliantly happy, vibrantly alive. He's talking, he's laughing, he's telling jokes in Jamaican patois that I can't understand. Irie, I and I. I get about half of it. He looks like a man who, at that moment, God has put down in precisely the place on earth where he is supposed to be. He is perfectly centered in the universe at that very moment. I think, this is good, this is going to be great. Not noticing that 2 Cambridge cops have come into the Dunkin' Donuts and are standing at the far end of the counter by the cash register, and they're looking at us, talking between themselves, looking at us. Me and 2 big Rastas, reeking of the world's most potent and religiously significant dope. I think this isn't going to be good. This isn't going to be all right at all. I start thinking about how to get us out of there. And while I'm trying to plan our escape, the younger of the 2 cops comes down the counter. He stands over Tosh, and he says, "Sir." Tosh looks up. The cop says, "Are you Peter Tosh?" Tosh nods. The cop says, "I thought that was you. I have all the Wailers records. I'm a huge fan. I said to my buddy, that looks like Peter Tosh from Bob Marley and the Wailers." My buddy said, "No, what would Peter Tosh from Bob Marley and the Wailers be doing at Dunkin' Donuts in Central Square at 1 o'clock in the morning? You must be crazy." "What are you doing in town?" I see our opportunity to escape. I stand. Tosh stands. Dexter stands. I say to the cop, "You're a fan. That's great. You know what? Big show tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, Sanders Theater. Tell you what, come on down to the show. I'll leave you a couple of tickets. They'll be at the box office. In an envelope, it'll just say Cambridge PD. Come on out. Have a good time. Love what you're doing. Thank you for your service. Legalize it, and we're out the front." Back in the car, we peel away. I drop him off at the Sheraton Commander Hotel about 2 o'clock in the morning. The show the next night was a big success. It was a sellout crowd. It was a great show. I remember Tosh flinging promotional packs of legalize it rolling papers into the crowd, the crowd plucking them out of the air. I thought of that night, on the night about 10 years later, when I heard on the news that Peter Tosh had been murdered in his house in Kingston, Jamaica, shot to death in a home invasion robbery by a guy who Tosh had befriended and tried to help find work after the guy had been released from jail. I thought about that night. Rastas don't believe in heaven. Nevertheless, I like to imagine Jah, the Rasta Supreme Being, and Peter Tosh standing side by side in Rasta heaven. And they're gazing out over all the moments of Peter Tosh's life on earth. And Jah saying, Peter Tosh, you were my faithful servant. These are all the moments of your life on earth. What was the best one? And Tosh replying, they were all good, but some of them were better than others. Thank you.